Hey everybody, happy Tuesday. It's coming live here for our power session. As always, super excited to be here. Give everybody a couple of minutes to jump on here as we dive into this. I'm not just going to sit here and wait though. She's already here, so we're live. One of my clients that make sure that I own that tagline every time we're on here. So super excited to be with you this Tuesday. Got some really fun things to talk about. I've been traveling like crazy, been in LA Los Angeles several times. I say LA and then Los Angeles because I was just in Louisiana, which is also LA. Been in Orlando, a whole bunch of different places. Feel like I've been in Hilton resorts more than my own bed this month, but super fun, meeting tons of amazing people and just kind of bringing this month to a close here in the next couple of days. This is just something I felt would be really awesome to be able to talk about because I think it's heavily misunderstood. And being able to shift our perspective is essential, and being able to grow and be able to create more. I know a lot of us are hungry for practicality and step 1, step 2, step 3, but that's what we have the easiest access to, and what most people are overdosing on are the steps of what they should do and how they should do it. And yet where we've added incredible value to the world and to our clients is helping them figure out why doing is very one-dimensional, very limited in terms of overall success and overall depth in relationships and vitality and health and healthy finances and everything else. It has a lot more to do with just how you should do it and what you should do. In fact, many of us are constantly taught what we should do and how we should do it, only to find ourselves in a state of confusion when it comes times to execution. And so we go back to wondering, okay, maybe it wasn't the right system, or maybe I didn't listen well enough or take good enough notes. Rarely is that the case. Rarely is it that we really don't know how to do something. It's oftentimes a perceived confusion because the doing is way ahead of the ability, way ahead of the becoming. I've compared this frequently to baking. We bake something that we see someone bake on TV, and it just doesn't turn out the same way because there's a lot more to doing that than just the actions or the activity that's taken. So today is one of those a little bit deeper focuses that I hope will be able to shift some perspective. Marianne Williamson, one of my favorite authors, she has my favorite quote of all time: our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate, our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. If you haven't read that entire quote, which was also made famous by Nelson Mandela, originally written by Marianne Williamson, amazing perspective. But she also went on to say about perspective that one of the greatest miracles in our lives is simply a shift or a change in perspective. We take for granted perspective, but one of the reasons that is, okay, and I'll draw this out for you while people are jumping on, before we dive into what business you're really in and challenge that perspective, is that we get this perspective, okay? We get this idea, a perspective, something that shifts, and it creates an emotional reaction, okay? We get an actual emotional reaction to this perspective. It feels good. It's most commonly called an aha or a breakthrough. And we grab onto it and we write notes about it and we post it in Facebook and we get this emotional high. But the only problem is we take this perspective and we go to do battle with our habits. Okay, and we bring perspective to do battle with our habits, and perspective loses the idea, the emotional infrastructure of the perspective completely gets obliterated, shattered on the rocks like a wave crashing when it tries to challenge our habits on its own. And so then we decide that perspective is cheap. Ahas are cheap, that this deep philosophical stuff, this fluff is cheap and it doesn't make the difference. So just tell me what to do and how to do it. Just tell me how to, tell me what step 1 is and what step 2 is, and I'll do it. There are only a couple of people on this planet that can operate that way. About 2% of the population can operate that way. But don't lose sight of the value of perspective, because if we can take perspective and harness the emotion that is in it, to start to insert it into our actions. And remember, these aren't just actions. These aren't just charge, okay? These are incremental. This is critical. These are incremental actions. Meaning if I'm going to go train for a marathon, I'm not going to go run 26 miles tomorrow unless I just got done running a marathon and I'm recovered and I'm in that kind of shape, which most of us aren't in our personal growth. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a decision harnessing the emotion of my perspective, and then that decision will guide and direct my actions that I will take incrementally and consistently. When I start to do these things, when I harness this emotion, rather than just try to take the emotion and go do battle with my habits and then end up broken and angry, I'm going to take this emotional response to this perspective. I'm going to allow it to feed my awareness and my actions that are incremental and consistent, and then I can partner. These actions become a partner with my habits. They start to bleed into my habits and eventually shift and transform those habits. And then it becomes, as Mandino talked about, a pleasure to perform. There isn't battle. Remember last week we talked about how what you have to fight for, you have to fight to keep? Well, let's stop doing battle, because that's an unfair battle in all perspective. Against your habits are going to lose every time, okay, unless we get the opportunity to harness that emotion and use it productively, which means allow it to guide our actions. So here's the problem. Perspective, emotional high and emotional peak, and then we're ready to go do battle with our habits, and so we just do it, right? The Nike philosophy, which is one of the top philosophies for attrition, for creating major problems in our lives for most entrepreneurs. You don't just do it. You've got to figure out how to become it. And that is an incremental, consistent, overall theme, patient process. I'm not about getting rich slow, okay? But we're not here about getting rich or successful through shortcuts. It's not just about harnessing some emotional charge and then try to pound it into your habits by just doing. Because when we do that, as we mentioned, we run into confusion, stress, fear, and we just shatter on the rocks. So value the perspective, but don't go backwards and try to just take the emotional peak of the perspective and go do battle with your habits, okay? Get an opportunity to be able to harness that emotion, okay, with intention or intentionality, kind of a hot topic this last year. Intentionality, which means we allow it to guide our actions. So if you're not taking action, but Paul, I don't know what to do. Do something. Most often when you don't know what to do, it's because your brain is on step 4 and you haven't taken 2 or 3. Or your brain's on step 104 and you haven't taken 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. It's one of the most common responses when people are saying, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do. More than likely, pretty safe bet, do something, okay? God doesn't drive parked cars, period, okay? So be doing something that allows that emotional charge to drive into your actions. Now, one of the challenges with doing something is that oftentimes, okay, and this is the last point I'll make before we dive into what business you're in, we have an other than mentality. Other than mentality. This is a very common mentality in the world. Hey, other than eating right and exercising, how do you lose weight? Hey, other than studying and going to school, how do you get a degree or a good job? Hey, other than whatever. It's amazing. Pay attention and listen in conversations with people when they're looking for advice, when they're looking for ways to do things, when they're looking to advance and grow or whatever. How often do we come with the mental attitude of other than? Other than the stuff that actually works, it's just not as exciting to us, not as stimulating to us. Other than the simple, basic, incremental, consistent steps of growth, how do I grow? Other than the core foundational principles of success, how do I succeed? Because for some reason we want it to be sexier, or we want it to be entertaining or stimulating. It certainly can be, as long as it's built on the foundation of true and proven practices, principles, and processes. So be careful through any of these power sessions when we dive into anything that will shift perspective. As Marianne Williamson said, a shift in perspective is one of the greatest miracles in our life. Remember the other than mentality, and remember that the idea of an aha or a perspective shift isn't to take that emotion and go try and backdoor our habits, go try and sneak up on them and and expect them to change, because they'll turn around and obliterate you, because we are a slave to our habits. The idea is to come into view of your habits and partner with them through actions you're taking. And usually entrepreneurs that are trying to grow are taking too many actions, which leads to thinking more about your actions, which leads to stress and anxiety and less action, but feeling like you're doing more. It's an incredible illusion, okay? Because we feel like we're working really hard, but we're just thinking really hard is really what's happening. And we find this consistency, and then we can partner with our habits and actually create this shift, okay? Now, what's the shift that I want to focus on today? It's what business are you in? I had the opportunity to speak to an amazing group of professionals, actually in the chimney industry in Louisiana this last week, and I asked them, what business are you in? Okay? And I'll ask you, what business are you in? What business are you in? Anybody? I'm curious. Give a second for the lag to catch up and people that are on chat. I'd love to hear. No wrong answers. Remember, this isn't about being right or wrong. We're just shifting perspective here. Because more than likely, anything you've got to say, unless you're purposely trying to be subversive, is probably going to be a good answer. And so we can take that good answer, shift the perspective to allow it to go deeper, to be more effective, to be more consistent, and to be able to make an impact on your habits. Okay. Cool. Perfect. The number one answer showed up quite a bit. Number one and number two answer I get are the people business and the relationship business. Looks like some of you were a little bit detail oriented in terms of what you're actually doing. Okay. Wellness, health, Mary imprinted pens. Nice. Okay, cool. So here's where we're going to shift some perspective. What business are you in? Well, they said very similar things when I was speaking. They said we're in the people business. We're in the relationship business. That's what we've been taught. That's been kind of a cute shift. It's kind of adorable to say, well, you're not in the chimney business. You're not in the health business. You're not in the business card business. You're in the people business. You're in the relationship business. And I've even fallen into this, to somehow believe that having the nobility to strike the banner of my business being people and relationships somehow puts me at an elevated level of consciousness. Here's a challenge. Most of us have no idea what that actually means. I'm in the people business. Okay, harsh reality. I'm pretty sure the last people that were in the people business put them in chains, sailed them across the ocean, and sold them to other people as property. So let's not be in the people business anymore, because people are not business. People aren't business. Relationships are not business. Business is business. We want to learn how to conduct that business on the foundation of connection with people, on the understanding that transactions can get you money, but relationships can help you become wealthy. But we're not in the people business. We're not in the relationship business. Those are things that we will want to focus on naturally. This, people and relationships, should be who we are, not business we do. Who we are, not business we do. That's people and relationships. It's an opportunity to honor the fact that if you want to be in business in anything, you want to be successful in that business, then don't apply the business to people and relationships, because then we get awkward conversations. Then we haven't had motivation to go out there and see the world until we have a product to offer it. And so it gets really weird and icky. And, oh, I'm not in sales, I just share. And then we don't make any money. And then we say crap like it's not about the money and I don't do this for the rank, when those are the best indicators of how well you're doing something. My business is to make a difference for people, but I don't care about the money. Well, guess what? The amount of money you're creating indicates how good your business is. So maybe we should back up a little bit and find out what business we're really in. Now, are people involved in that business? Are relationships involved in that business? Abso-freaking-lutely, definitely, but they are not the business. They are not the exchange. They are not the transaction. That should be a natural part of your intrinsic, okay? Let me clear off some of this stuff now that we made this point. People are a natural intrinsic part of our existence. Just the fact that we're here connects us with people. Now, I'm okay with someone having a difficult time having the right motivation to want to learn this, to want to learn connection, to want to learn people, because now they're in a business that requires them to do so. But what we don't want to have is have the core reason, the core drive for people to be business, because that will be oil and water. Now, are people involved? And yes, but let's shift our perspective a little bit in terms of how we're focusing on our businesses, okay? Because if our business is people, then people become transactional. No matter how flowery or wonderful we make it sound, or affirmations we speak, or nice quotes we put on Facebook or social media or whatever, at the end of the day, what only matters is the construct of our habits of thinking. And if we're teaching our habits of thinking that people are our business, then we're going to lose sight of what should be naturally brought to anything in this life. Connection. We're going to lose sight of how pure and powerful that can be. I love the way that Dan McCormick, a great friend of mine and one of the most successful network marketers I know, has been doing it for decades, an incredible human being. I love how he put it. He said, I make friends, and some of them happen to buy product from me. Okay, so is Dan in the friend business? No, he's got a business that he believes in. And the reason he's able to show up as amazingly and as wonderfully as he does in that is because he's a friend. He is a friend. He's not in the friend business. Just like we don't go in the people business, we become people. And people are built to connect. No wonder we get so psyched out and worried about what we should be saying and how we should say it, because we're looking at another person like we would look at a balance sheet, like a P&L, because we're in a people business. Let's start to let go of some of these perspectives that aren't serving us. If I could offer a little bit of a different perspective, okay, for you to be able to focus, because a business should be something that you study. It should be something that you learn, that you master, that you gain skill sets to serve you in doing that. But let's make something really clear. The prerequisite to anything, business or anything else, is having an intrinsic connection to people. Understanding that a person is priceless. Understanding that a person is beyond worth. That a person is unique. That's ante for the game. That's what you have to pay just to get to play the game. That should be our natural foundation. Now, I'm not saying you have to have this all figured out as you go along. If you had to have this perfected before you could go into business, no one would go into business. But I want you to go into business not thinking you're in the people business, but using the business as motivation and drive to be able to separate from and learn people. And once you've done that, then you can start to play with both. then you can start to incorporate both one step at a time. It's going to be bumpy at first. It might not go smoothly. And I'm not saying stop talking to people until you figure this out. I'm saying from this day on, you're going to go talk to people with the sensitivity that you're not in the people business. You'll talk to people about business, but if you've been frustrated in that process, if people are letting you down or disappointing you, you're afraid of them, or you can't talk to them, or any of that friction, you're now going to go, oh, am I treating this person like a business? Or am I treating this person like a person? That doesn't mean time out, don't do the business. Don't tell them about your product. Don't share with them what you do, what your purpose is, what your mission is, what your nonprofit is, whatever it is. I'm not saying stop doing things. That's a huge challenge in personal development, is we'll get that idea and then we'll want to figure it all out mentally and emotionally before we execute. When the greatest place to figure it out is on the battlefield. The greatest place to figure it out is in action. That's why Og stressed that one of the greatest secrets of success, one of the greatest things that we can learn, is that our actions should control our thoughts, aka our feelings, okay? In addition to our feelings, rather than letting our feelings or our thoughts control our actions. So be in action and find places where you can separate people from the business. That should be something that naturally occurs. And then from that space, you can start to talk to people that now you honor as priceless, beyond worth, and unique. You can honor them by sharing something that you think could add value to their life. This takes practice. This takes time. Okay, it's not a matter of being able to understand something that's wrong with your form in tennis or in golf and instantly being able to adopt it and change it. You've got to feel it. You've got to build a mind-muscle connection. You've got to create muscle memory, which is just neural pathways supporting the activity you're trying to create. So when you go back into your business today or the next day or any day, I want you to start allowing the perspective of the fact that you're not in the people business start to improve your confidence. I don't know what to say to people. Well, maybe you don't know what to say to people when you're looking at people as a business. If you're looking at a person as priceless, beyond worth, and unique, there isn't much you need to say. There's just a whole lot to listen to. You don't walk up and say, hey, have you ever thought about starting your own business? Now, if you feel impressed to do that, and you've got a good solid foundation of seeing people this way and not people as a business, that can happen. The problem is we see someone do that and assume that they're in the people business, so we go and duplicate that without having this solid foundation built on agape love and other things we talked about last week and in previous sessions on here. We assume that it's a people business because we missed what was going on under the surface. Just like when we tried to duplicate what that person baked, okay, on the TV that we couldn't duplicate, we didn't realize there were some things under the surface that weren't as simple as just do this, just do this, just do that. But then we can go from, for those of you who are new at this, we don't go up to someone and say, hey, have you ever thought about starting your own business? We get to walk up to someone and say something like, hey, you look like you've got a story that I'd love to hear. Do you mind telling me about you? In fact, if any of you are worried about this, I'd challenge you to do that a couple times between now and the next power session. Go out where people are out and about, or find someone on Facebook or whatever, and go on Messenger and say, hey, you look like someone who's got a story that I'd love to hear. Do you mind telling me about yourself? And don't pick at random. Find someone that the way they look or where they're from or their interests or the comments they put in that group you're a part of caught your attention. It should be something sincere and authentic to draw upon, and then make it about the person. And if you happen to interject the business at an awkward time and it doesn't go over well or what, no problem. You didn't ruin anything. We're shifting perspective. We're not flipping a switch. This takes increments and time. Talking to someone this morning who we were talking about how if you want to go figure out how to run a mile, you can't walk out of your house, run 100 yards, go, this is too hard, and turn around and go back, and then say you're never going to be able to run a mile because you can't ever go beyond 100 yards. You can. You just are not creating the perspective that makes it worthwhile to trust that that threshold of pain or discomfort or awkwardness or stress or whatever is a lie. It's just something your brain's using to try and keep you safe, okay? We are turning the tide, people. You don't do that by walking up to the beach and just splashing in the water and go, I'm turning the tide. No, you're just splashing water. Turning the tide takes time. Okay? It takes depth. It takes influence. It takes sensitivity. It takes patience. So that's what we're looking to do here. Don't allow any of this to freeze you from doing things. It's the application of this perspective to what you're already doing that gives it power. It is the application of this perspective to what you're already doing that gives it power. If you're not willing to be awkward, if you're not willing to be uncomfortable, you're never going to get where you want to go. So that's another reason to start incrementally. If you go way overboard awkward, way overboard crazy, the likelihood that your body is going to want to retreat even more, your mind is going to want to pull in even more, is pretty good. A rubber band, get snapped back into it. But if we can take it one step at a time, realize that we are not in the people business, we can start spending more of our energy and learning how to see people as priceless, beyond worth, unique. Guess what starts to disappear then? The fear of rejection. If you are in the people business, then a person there's no rejection. There's just an opportunity for connection, whether they're willing to or not, and we will honor either decision. But is it possible that we've been a little frustrated with rejection, or people being excited and then disappearing and never calling us back, because we have been abusing people as a business without even knowing it? It's not an indictment. You're not a bad person because of this. These are just some of the assumptions that the mind makes. Is it possible that your fear of rejection, that you continuing to convince yourself you don't know what to say to people, comes from the fact that you have believed up to this point you were in a people business, rather than you connect with people and you have a business? Then we can start to focus on what's going to connect those two. What's going to connect those two? If we can understand that there are people, let me switch colors just for fun. We can start to understand that there are people and there is business. What can bring these two things together? Okay? That's where we find what business you are in. That's where we start to know what we can pour our skill set into, where we can learn, where we can grow, where we can create a cohesive business experience. And that, if I could offer, is experience. Most of you, and by most of you I mean all of you, are in the experience business. Regardless of what industry you're in, regardless of what your product or service is, you're in the experience business. There are 3 experiences going on in any business at any time that connect the people and the business, and when understood, allow you to be and master and succeed in the experience business. If you master the experience business and you have a prerequisite, okay, like in college, you have to take prerequisite classes before you can take the ones you're really interested in. If your prerequisite is something you are the most interested in, unlike college, and it's people and their pricelessness and their worthiness, and that they're more important than your own self-sabotaging dialogue, like we talked about last week, we're not looking inward. It's everyone else that's the university of you. That's where you learn most about you. That's where you grow. That's where you learn to love yourself. That's where you learn to listen to yourself, is by loving other people and listening to other people. If that can become your prerequisite, your foundation, then you can start to master business through experience. There are 3 experiences involved here. Okay? There's your experience. What is the experience you are actually having? How clear are you on where you're really at in life? There are 3 primary questions that can help you check in with this. Checking in with your experience. We talked about this briefly last week in terms of taking inventory before an event. Your experience, one of the greatest ways to illuminate the experience you're actually having is to ask, what don't I like about my life? What do I wish was different? And what do I hope will change? What do I not like about my life? What do I wish was different? and what do I hope will change? These are listed in the previous power session, and now they'll be recorded in this one. But that's how we start to improve our awareness, our application, and our skill set in terms of your experience, what experience you're actually having, okay? Then there is their experience. Who's they? Everybody else. You will want to become a master of understanding their experience, which is impossible to do if people is not the foundation that you build your business on top of. You're not in the people business. Your business is built on the foundation of connection and people and love and understanding. Because if you can do that, you can start to understand their experience, which really nicely, reciprocally, will teach you about your experience. You'll learn more about your experience through them as well, just like we were talking about with other things and challenges and listening and all that last week. So our business is the experience business. What experience are we actually having? What experience are they actually having? What's really going on in their lives? What assumptions are we naturally making? Over 90% of the entrepreneurs we work with have a thought process that is over-focused in what is called presumptive, which makes it nearly impossible to accurately see their experience if you don't know how to honor people. If you don't know how to listen to understand and actually have them feel understood. Those are two different things. Listening to understand and actually allowing them to feel understood are two different things. We'll talk about them on here if you keep coming to these power sessions. I'll make sure you get that, okay? But it makes you more acutely aware of their. Remember, over 90% of entrepreneurs have a tendency of having a challenge to actually understand their. We assume we know what their experience is. We're really good at assuming what other people are going through or not going through. We're really good at assuming what will bother them or not bother them. We're really good at assuming what they can afford and what they can't afford. And we build these assumed limitations of how we can interact with them based on what we assume their experience is, and then get frustrated with the limitations we put on them for us. We're doing that. We're authors of our greatest frustrations with people. So let's start shifting out of the people business where it causes a frustration to ripple through every area of our life and just start honoring and listening to people, and then bring business to it through the business you're really in, which is the business of experience. And then comes the third dimension. The third dimension is their experience with you. In other words, how they are experiencing you. There's your experience, which will add value to this equation. There's their experience, which will add incredible value to this experience. And then there's understanding how they are experiencing you that is the ultimate. If you can understand how someone is actually experiencing you, that is the core of leadership. The core of leadership is understanding how people are experiencing you so that you can best serve them. The amount of leaders that are making poor assumptions with good intentions, so they cancel each other out in what they are experiencing, meaning everyone else. The number of leaders that are doing this is astronomical. Most of them are not aware. Most of them aren't in a position to even become aware because they've got really good intentions. And rarely do we inspect in our own lives things that we have wrapped in good intentions. Rarely do we inspect in our own lives the things that we have wrapped in good intentions. We've talked about this before, how we approach our kids. Rarely do we inspect how our children are actually experiencing us because it's wrapped in really good intentions. So we trust that they'll just pay attention to the wrapping paper. But good intentions like wrapping paper is just like your 5-year-old at Christmas. They didn't care what the wrapping paper was. They couldn't wait to tear it off. Just like your kids can't wait to tear off your intentions and not even pay attention to it. And all they're paying attention to is how they are experiencing you. Now you can sit there and get frustrated about the assumptions they're making about what you're trying to create as an experience. Or you could take the high road. You could take the successful road. You could take the intrinsic road and start to show up differently and be more sensitive about how they are actually experiencing you. That, in my opinion, is the business you're in. The experience business. The principles we teach. The reason we want to learn about our habits of thinking, because unhealthy habits of thinking distort how accurately, remember, accuracy being the core of the highest level of love, agape love, a heightened level of awareness. Unhealthy habits of thinking distort how accurately we can assess this and this and this. And how accurately you can assess those and apply what you assess is what will determine the success of your experience business, regardless of industry, regardless of product or service. So what is one of the biggest challenges? One of the biggest things that frustrates how good we are at an experience business? Remember where we started? People are intrinsic. Okay? Intrinsic. People are intrinsic, but most of us operate systemically. Most of us operate in a systemic mindset. What is a systemic mindset? Well, in mathematics, it's a singular property represented by a lowercase n, which none of you cared about, okay? But that's what it is. But what that interprets to in your life, a systemic thought process, is all or nothing. Right or wrong. Black and white, life or death. You could go on with a big long list. That's systemic thinking. So if we are in a systemic mindset and trying to apply it to an intrinsic person, to a person. In fact, let me correct myself. That's probably a much more accurate way to put it, because people is a general concept, and a lot of us get ourselves in trouble by being too general in our own growth and our perspective. A person is intrinsic. Many of us think systemically, which just means we're thinking in an all or nothing track, a right or wrong track. There's no gray area, okay? There's no shades. There's no collaboration. There's no compromise. Now, our intellectual mind has learned these things and can fake them quite well. We can try and come across as very democratic, or we can try to come across, but usually it's passive aggressive, and we're not aware of it because we're in a systemic mindset that can't pick up on those nuances, because we're showing up with good intentions, but that's like writing "I love you" on a Post-it note and putting it on a Sherman tank and driving it at somebody. The likelihood that they're going to stop and go, "Oh, they really care about me," it's not very good. They're going to notice a big giant tank coming at them with a huge gun on it, and they're going to run. Okay? Whether people run from you emotionally or they run from you physically, okay, or they're going to fight. Whether they fight you emotionally or actually fight you physically is a reason to become aware of the fact that our default process for many of us as entrepreneurs is very systemic, but a person is intrinsic. It's why you're not in the people business, because business is a system. It's systemic. So what we want to do is start to open ourselves up to this experience. If we can start to shift out of this experience, which starts by honoring a person as intrinsic, which means, let me give you some basic terms. When we do that, which means, simply put, we listen and find good. We listen and find good. If our focus is listen to people, really listen. And so that, as a part of our business, not because we're in the people business, because we're in the experience business, we already have a foundation of people. They're not our business. They are our connection to this world. They are the expression of the love and the value we have to offer humanity, okay? To the contributions that we have to offer. We can listen to people. And we can find good in those people and in their ideas so that when we get to the business part, we're not stuck in a systemic mindset. Because guess what? If you need to be right, that means the only option for them is to be wrong. And a lot of us, all of us, it's impossible to become aware that that is happening in the moment when we're stuck in a systemic thought process. Because we were in a people business, so we systemically, without even realizing it, went into it with people. But because some part of us understands how valuable people are, and we're in a people business, we apply our good intentions, our good heart, but it gets swallowed up by systemic ways of thinking. Now, systemic thinking can be really helpful. Systemic thinking can create systems and laws and rules and guidelines, really, really great things that are supportive in our structure. But if we're not building that on a foundation of connection with people, and we're trying to pile all those together, it's like taking a beautiful 3-course meal and throwing it in a blender and whipping it up. It tastes like crap because we're trying to bleed all this stuff together rather than become masters of the experience, which is the business you're actually in. Crystal asks, so how do you accurately assess how someone is seeing you? That's coming back to here. Listening and finding good in their ideas. Actually listening, which is really difficult for a lot of people to do. I was in a group coaching session yesterday, and someone was having an emotional experience. It was an incredible experience with this group. And I asked if she was okay, and she opened up and started sharing. And for the next several minutes, I didn't say a word. And you could tell as she shared more and more, and she had several pauses in between, that almost everyone on that call was just yearning to jump in and help relieve her pain, yearning to just jump in and solve her problem, yearning to relate to her. Even people started putting things in the chat, and thank goodness she wasn't looking at the chat. I just sat there and I just listened. And I made her experience more important than mine. That, Crystal, is how you guarantee the accuracy of how people are experiencing you. Because if you show up with your agenda, you show up with your system, you show up ready to put your business upon them because you're in the people business, and we don't show up to listen and find good, sure, we might get the sale, we might get the deal, we might get the partnership, but then we spend our lives in damage control. And much of what coaches and consultants, especially in business, I see spending time do is just teaching people how to be better at damage control rather than getting to the source that you aren't in a people business. You will want to learn people, a person, priceless, beyond worth, how to connect, how to listen, how to find good in their ideas so that you can be in the business you're truly in and have accuracy, agape love, that heightened level of awareness, accuracy as to how they're experiencing you. Take inventory of my experience. What don't I like about my life? What do I wish was different? And what do I want to change? Subtle differences, but they'll each uncover different things, powerful stuff. Yes, Lynette, they're always recorded and posted on the Habit Finder page within just a 5-10 minutes of this. It takes time for Facebook to just process it and optimize it for the page, but then you can always go back in and watch it. So listen and find good in their ideas, even when you don't think it's possible. Because your brain's more powerful than Google. And if you want to find anything on Google, you'll find it. If you want to find bad things about a topic, you'll find it. If you want to find good things about a topic, you'll find it. Your brain is the same way. If you're in the people business and your life and your wherewithal, your financial well-being is on people, it's not. It's on the quality of the experience you can provide. And that you can't even get there if you don't have an opportunity to be able to understand, connect, listen, and find good in people. You bring that to the business. That's not the business. The business that I'm arguing that you're in today is the experience business. The experience that you're having, how clear are you about where you're really at? A lot of people out there who are playing the status game, playing the pretend I'm better off than I am, and trying to impress people without realizing that's where it's coming from. Most people who want to impress other people are not honest with themselves that that's part of what's driving them, or one of the tethers that's holding them back, more accurately put, or trying to play the upper hand and keep the strength in the relationship and control the conversation and all this stuff we're taught that has no place with people. But if you've earned the opportunity for someone to feel understood and you feel impressed to share your business with them, well, now you're going to want to be equipped to continue that experience. That's why you're in the experience business, because when you focus on people for their pricelessness, their worth, their uniqueness, a connection gets created. Then, in the words of Will Smith and Hitch, then you just need to not screw it up. If you feel impressed to add value, how can you continue your sensitivity of that business and the experience they have with your business and maintain the same level that you did with the person? Well, first is divorce from the idea that you're in a people business. You're not. You are about people and listening and finding good and connecting. And you just happen to have a business that might be able to serve some of those people that you'll have no idea how to tap into your intuition to clearly decide whether this could be of value with them if you aren't already connected to the person. If you are not listening and finding good in them, you have no right to determine whether what you have to offer is of value. Because if you force that, you'll pay for it later. Every time. Exactly, Norma. What is your intention? That's the part of your experience. Because if your experience has a little bit of victim in it, if your experience has a little bit of insecurity in it, or has, all of them are usually subtext to being a victim, or of impressing or pretending or fear or shame. If that's your experience and you're pretending it's not, what's the likelihood you're going to be able to tap into accuracy of their experience? And then even worse, being able to understand how they are experiencing you. Because most of us make up stories about how they're experiencing us, but those are usually those of us who aren't out there experiencing people. And then those of us who are actually out there experiencing people are often driving systemic agendas and needing to be right, which means they need to be wrong, and obliterating the first principle of your life, and that's connection. To listen and find good. And if any of you are sitting there going, yeah, but how do I do this? Or how do I apply this? Well, first, go out there. And go out there could mean a million different things. Go out there on social media. Go out there to your spouse and see how your experience of them changes when you become more sensitive to how they are experiencing you. Do that with your kids. Go out there could mean go do an event, go to a networking thing, go do marketing, go whatever, but go out there. It is impossible for you to learn a person if you're not around people, virtually or physically. So if you're sitting there going, okay, this feels right, this feels good, but I'm not quite sure how to do it. Well, go get around people and let go of the most underrated principle in business there is, and that's to figure it out. Figuring it out is overrated. We don't get to figure it out. It's the process of figuring it out. It's the journey that creates the joy. We never completely figure ourselves out, because as soon as we figure something out, there is more to figure out. So if you had this destination-based mentality, as soon as I figure it out, my life will be totally different. Nope, because as soon as you figure that out, you realize that there's another thing to figure out. We do this with our habits all the time. We have a day where I totally decided to go against, we call it a tomahawk. I'm staying in creation. I'm not going to surrender to that unhealthy habit of thinking. And as soon as we do that, we do it successfully, and then we realize that same decision needs to be made again and again and again and again. And we don't draw joy from the figuring it out, from the process, and we keep waiting to reach this high ground, this destination, it will rob you of your greatest gifts. Because then life becomes a grind. Then it becomes this hope, this wish that someday we'll get to this point where we've made enough money, we don't have to worry about money anymore. And we've served enough people, we don't have to deal with annoying people anymore. It doesn't exist. So start by getting out of the people business and just go find people And as you're doing that, start to introduce your sensitivity to their experience. And it will be like learning stick shift. You're going to grind some gears. You're going to pop the clutch prematurely and stall the engine. You're going to have a hard time countering this systemic thought process. And it's going to happen, but grind the gears. Okay? Pop the clutch prematurely. Just be okay with that. It's part of the process of growth. Practice, practice, practice. But as long as you're applying true principles, which is that you're not in a people business, you're in an experience business. And as long as you are applying, remember the first diagram, actions incrementally and consistently, then you can win this game. And the game is playing the game. The game is not winning and beating everybody else. The game is playing the game. Life isn't about dying. Life is about living. So let's stop waiting for destinations. Let's stop waiting for things to happen to us and go start happening to it. And the first part of that is people listening and finding good. It's the first thing we teach CEOs of Global 100 companies down to people starting their first home-based business ever. Okay? All right. Whew. So if any of you are feeling a little overwhelmed by this, or feeling like this is a little too nebulous, it's a little too out there, keep it simple. You're not in a people business. You connect with people because they're people, because a person is priceless, beyond worth. So go find opportunities to connect. And as you're connecting with them, start paying attention to how you're experiencing them and how they're experiencing you, and listening so you can actually understand more about their experience independent of yours. And then if you do this well and regularly enough, you'll start hearing this beautiful thing called intuition. It'll say, hey, this person could really be served by your business. And then you don't have to question that you're in a people business. You have a person that is priceless beyond worth. And then when you decide to tell them about your business, you're not doing it from a systemic place, all or nothing, right or wrong. You're doing it because you're honoring their value as a human being. Imagine how much more empowered, how much more confident you would feel if when you share your opportunity, it is to honor their pricelessness, their worthiness, their uniqueness, rather than what you've convinced yourself of in the past that you're taking advantage of it. That's why we're not in a people business. It may not look much different, but it will feel different. And then just be ready to grind some gears. Be ready to have some awkward conversations. You don't get to skip that stuff. That's part of what earns you the right to enjoy the fruit, to enjoy the splendor of going through that process. And let's play the right game, which means we're going to fall in love with playing the game, not winning the game. Because this game ends when we die. So let's not wait around or figure out how to acquire a bunch of things for that point. Let's figure out how to acquire things now. Let's figure out how to add value now. Let's figure out how to connect now, because we are falling in love with the process of them, and we're falling in love with the process of us, and we're falling in love with the process of them experiencing us. Because we are in the experience business. Thanks, everybody. Hope this was helpful. Throw anything in the comments that you'd like me to clarify more about. Reach out to us if you have any questions about this topic. If you haven't taken the Habit Finder, please go to habitfinder.com and take it ASAP. It will give you the measurements. It'll show you the blind spots that are making this process difficult for you. And then if you're ready to take that on, whether in a group or one-on-one, reach out to us. You'll get connected with a Habit Finder specialist, my team, who's just right downstairs here, whose marching orders are not to sell you things, because we do this. We're not in the people business. We're in the experience business. And if selling you something is more important than honoring you, then we're not masters of what we're teaching. So take the Habit Finder. If you've already taken it, get in touch with your Habit Finder specialist and have an experience with us, with your measurements, what's holding you back and creating your challenges. Thanks so much for being here, everybody. Take care.